Hi and welcome to the Geek Legion of Doom. This is a sci-fi movie review and I'll be having a look at the movie After the Dark, also known as The Philosophers. Now this film was an extremely hard film to try and describe. So the very quick premise is about a group of teenagers sitting in a classroom discussing what they would do at the end of the world. And within that kind of film you have different dramatizations of different scenarios based on kind of end of the world situations. That's basically the film here. So it isn't a sci-fi film really, it's kind of a drama film really with kind of sci-fi trappings and just a kind of a what would happen in the end of the world kind of situations. But at the end of the day, the actual apocalypse, that isn't actually an apocalypse film, it's just a bunch of kids in a classroom. So let me go into a little bit more further detail, and there may be some mild spoilers here. I won't reveal anything major, but I have to kind of talk about maybe a couple of things to obviously to critique the film, I suppose. So it plays a little bit like an anthology. So that the central wraparound story is this group of teenagers, 20 teenagers, and there's one teacher in this classroom discussing this kind of theological debate about who would live and who would die, and within that there's kind of this kind of the classroom. It actually sets up a little bit of a love triangle sort of B plot as well. The problem is that you don't really get to know the characters because it cuts between this kind of the real world and this kind of fantasy sort of apocalyptic scenarios. So you don't care in the day about this kind of love triangle, which kind of the very kind of end of this film is really sort of focuses on. You simply don't care. Now it might sound like these kind of apocalyptic scenarios may be a little bit more interesting. I guess they are. But the problem is that because you know that this apocalypse isn't really happening, at the end of the day you're just watching a film about some people discussing it. It really undercuts any sort of dramatic tension that you kind of want. So you kind of don't really care. And the other thing that the film does is when you're watching these sort of three separate apocalyptic scenarios, it doesn't play properly like a kind of a sort of separate story. So what I mean by that is when you have these sort of characters and they sort of go into the role. So the teacher would say to them, okay, you're a doctor, you're a soldier, you're a farmer, and you kind of got to act in the character of that sort of particular way. But other than that, you're the same personality, so to speak. And they kind of sort of go into the role, but they still sort of are aware that it's actually only a dramatization. So certain things they don't act like they really would, if that makes sense. I know it's a very hard film to explain this one. So let me give you a very convoluted example of what I mean by this. So it really focuses on a kind of couple, a main couple, the two main characters, a guy and a girl. And in one scenario, the main guy, he's told he's a farmer and he's gay, okay? But he's going out with this girl in kind of the real life, if you like. And kind of part of the scenario is they have to try and repopulate the world because there are very few humans left in this particular scenario, and they have to kind of repopulate the world. And the guy's character, he's gay, so he's saying, right, my character's gay, so therefore I refuse to sleep, I refuse to procreate with a woman on the basis that my character is gay, and he wouldn't do that. But at the same time, in real life, his character is in love with the main female character, if you like. And he gets kind of like jealous when ultimately her sort of apocalypse version of her character goes off with another guy. So he's only part way into the role, because if he were truly into the role and he was truly gay, then he simply wouldn't care. I hope that makes sense, but this is a very hard film to explain. So you kind of never really buy into these kind of situations because they never really feel real. The characters only seem half invested. It's a kind of very strange, very kind of muted and subdued film. Now this is going to sound like a weird comparison, but it kind of reminded me of Twilight. Now let me explain. So I'm not talking about the story or nothing to do with vampires or anything like that, but the way the film is actually shot and kind of it's directed, it's a kind of very sort of soft focus. You'll have lots of stares, you've got these kind of lines of dialogue where people just say a very short thing and there's a long pause and then someone else says something else. It's a long pause, and it kind of just reminds me of the way the kind of Twilight films were in a way. Not that I've seen many of them, but you know, what I have seen. So it's kind of, it gets a bit frustrating to watch because you just kind of want to sort of move it along somewhat, and it's almost like, the other thing I'll compare it to is if you were actually watching a kind of a philosophical debate. So if you were watching a kind of classroom having this actual debate, this is kind of what this film is like. It's kind of almost like watching a class. So it's about as interesting. So a lot of this, I think, will depend on your opinion about if you will find this kind of thing interesting or not. I kind of understand there are some good ideas here, but I think the film thinks it's cleverer than it actually is, and it raises some interesting questions. And there's all sorts of questions, you know, moral dilemmas, you know, versus logic, that kind of thing. So a lot of that is explored, but as a piece of entertainment, unfortunately, the film is flawed because it ultimately doesn't make it a very interesting film to watch. It just raises some interesting questions, but then watching a class of philosophy will do that. So as a film, as a piece of entertainment, I have to say I found it quite dull. I say the performances I found quite sort of uninvolved as well, because I don't know, there's a bunch of 20s, I guess 20 sort of young teenagers, early 20s, however old they're supposed to be, but they're kind of all very sort of non-characters, if that makes sense. Apart from a couple of kind of the more the background characters, there's a guy who's kind of in the real class life, if like he's gay. He's by far the most kind of has the most personality about him, but everyone else seems very kind of one-dimensional and just not particularly interesting. And that's the main problem with this film. Although it does have some interesting questions and it does kind of make you think about certain things, it is a bit dull at the end of the day. And I think some people are going to like it, and some people just find it terribly dull. But nevertheless, 5 out of 10 for me. Bit of a strange one. So have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment. I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.